Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirit is back with episode 52. I've got a good episode for you today. Got to sit down with one of my best friends, Mr. Chris Winn. So it was a joy to hear more about his life and his spiritual journey. So I hope that you enjoy it. As always, would love for you all to come and be on the show. Best way to support the show. So contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com, either to be on the show or to inquire about spiritual direction. You can always leave a message as well on a Google Voice number, 615-933-9737, and we'll discuss your story or feature your story on the show. So we'd love to hear from you there. As always, thanks for all the support and love, sharing the episodes, hitting the like buttons, subscribe buttons. Appreciate very much those of you who support in the subscriptions as well. And got a advertisement for us today. I want to point out that a friend of mine, Caroline Vogel, who has been on the show as well, is leading a retreat. So those of you who are here locally or near Knoxville, check out this retreat offering. It's the first week in August, and it's a retreat to ground you in a greater sense of peace and open to the breath of the Spirit, led by Caroline Vogel. You can find out more at carolinevogel.com, and plenty of time to sign up, so check that out. All right, hope you guys enjoy, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace. All right, we are rolling live. Good morning, Chris Winn.
Good morning, Brad.
My good friend, my good buddy. Welcome. Good to have you with me. Finally getting you on here, so I'm excited. I'll admit, I'm a little curious where we're going to go because we know each other a little too well.
That's very true.
So
we can go down a couple of different rabbit holes and see where we pop up at.
Yeah. Well, since I know you super well, but folks listening don't, so just tell folks who you are, what you do, where you're from, little intro to Chris Winn.
Intro to Chris Winn. Married to my wonderful wife, Christy Starks Winn. I have 3 wonderful children, Lily, Clara, and Justin. Originally from Chattanooga. We moved to Knoxville about 2010, I believe. Christy's work brought us up here, and we've been here since 2010. Absolutely love Knoxville area. Shortly after we came to Knoxville, a couple of years, we had the honor to go to a church called, I think it was Church of the Ascension. And I had the honor of sitting in a service once and hearing a Led Zeppelin-driven sermon that blew my mind, and I knew I got to meet this guy. So thank you for that.
I might have snuck in a Led Zeppelin lyric into a sermon or two.
That was, yeah. Honest, I'll never forget that. I remember poking Christy and saying, "That's Led Zeppelin." And she said, "No, it's not. He's preaching."
He's talking about the Lord.
That is Led Zeppelin, 100%. Led Zeppelin.
I'd forgotten that. That's so funny. Oh, man.
That's something I always remember, and I tell other people about, too. I said, you got to listen to Brett whenever he gets on one of those sermons. It's, man, you do a great job. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, brother. Appreciate that. So, spirituality, Chris Winn, what does that look like in your life? Like, when you think of your spiritual life and what that's looked like over time, where do you dive in? Where did that start for you? Did it start with church? Did it start with, I'll just leave it there.
Well, all right. So let's go back to my grandfather I never met, who was a preacher. And so my mom was the daughter of a preacher, and my uncles and aunts were children of a preacher. And so I never met my grandfather. And so people sometimes that you've never met, they're the greatest humans ever because you only have great memories of them.
Yeah.
And it was put into my mom, you go to church. Mm-hmm. Was brought up Baptist.
Was he a Baptist preacher?
He was a Baptist preacher,
okay.
Yes. There in Daisy, Tennessee. But sometimes I would go to church with my mom and then in the summers with my aunt. So I was independent Baptist, and then what I call backwoods Baptist.
Yeah.
That's just the best way to describe. But all of it was fire and brimstone type of preaching. I've listened to many of your podcasts, and one memory I have of a childhood in church was fear.
Yeah.
I was afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, God was going around taking people out.
Yeah.
He took out whole communities. If you didn't do right, he was going to get you.
Yeah.
And then to top it off, you have you got a preacher that's, great men, but they're up there yelling at you.
Yeah.
And they're screaming, and it scares the far out of you, and you think, goodness.
Kind of like Santa Claus on steroids. Like.
Absolutely. Except he knows everything. God knows it all.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not that was a bad thing growing up, because I was mischievous, and I got into trouble, and my mom would always tell me, God knows what you're doing.
That tempered you a little bit, that fear?
Definitely.
Yeah.
100%. Which we're Episcopalians now, and I would love to take some Episcopalians back to those backwood Baptist churches.
Yeah.
Because I knew the sound when Haskell Malone would come off from the podium.
Yeah.
Because as boys, we would be mischievous. We'd be back there doing something we wasn't supposed to do. And you could hear his footsteps and his tone change. And you would straighten up. But he would still come back, and he would grab you by the shoulder and stand you up and pop you on the bottom. He wouldn't hit you.
Right in the middle of the sermon?
Right in the middle of the sermon.
Did he stop talking? Or
Never stop. Just continues. Come down the aisle, and you'd be oh. And there'd be like 5 or 6 boys going, oh, one of us. There's going to be one of us. They just stand you up, pop you on the bottom, set you back down, turn around, walk back up, and continue preaching.
That's good.
And then you would get it worse when you got home, of course, because Mom would go tell Dad.
Be embarrassed. Yeah.
Chris got popped. Haskell had to come down and get on to him. So, that's one of the memories I have, and it scared me. Another strong memory I have, and I think I've told you this before, was whenever I was baptized. And I was saved and baptized about the age of 5 or 6 years old. We was baptized in the lake. So you would go out to the lake, you'd get baptized. Haskell Malone was, I was a little guy. He's like 6'6", but he looked like a giant. Great big, humongous hands. He would baptize you in the water. He would take you down and baptize you and hold you under the water until you started to fight.
Yeah.
And you would struggle.
Yeah.
And when he brought you up, you would take in this deep air.
Yeah.
And then he would tell you, now you have truly been reborn. That was the life coming back into you.
Yeah.
So, that added to the fear.
Yeah, and not to get too deep with that story, but I know that sounds crazy for people to hear, but theologically, that's not totally wrong. He was trying to drive home that death and resurrection thing, and there's evidence that the old practices of baptism were more like that.
Wow. 50 years, it's still stuck with me for 50 years. I remember that exact moment.
Yeah. I always tell a story of an old priest in the Diocese of Virginia that he would baptize it was his thing. He would always be at the camps, the summer camps, and he'd baptize kids in the pool. But he would talk to them beforehand, similar but different. He would tell them, when you go in that water, you'll never be as dead as you are when you go under, and you'll never have been more alive when you come out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Well, continuing on with my journey through religion, lo and behold, many, many years later, I met a wonderful woman by the name of Christy. And I was not so much in church when I met Christy. I was in and out of church. Through my youth, yes, very strong. Strong enough that it was Sunday morning, Sunday night.
Yeah.
And then again on Wednesday evening, you went to service.
And let me ask you about that time period. So before Christy, like just your youth growing up, was your relationship with God just the way you've described, mainly through the church, or was there an internal relationship
through the church?
Okay, so you hadn't sort of delved deeper than that. It was basically through organized religion. Do right and you'll be blessed. Do wrong and you'll be punished.
You'll pay for it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, that's kind of interesting you say that. I also remember one other thing. I know these you ask for moments in your life. Whenever I was a teenager, of course, Baptists, we say backsliding.
Yeah.
And backsliding's bad. Mm-hmm. And I was always taught backsliding can be worse than never knowing at all.
Oh, okay.
Because you knew and you went away.
Yeah.
So I was guilty of backsliding, and my mama took me to a evangelistic thing. Very famous preacher. It was actually Kenneth Copeland who came to Chattanooga.
And like a revival or something?
It was. Yeah. It was at Ingle Stadium. Mm-hmm. And I never will forget, at that revival, we're there, everybody's on the baseball field, and this storm comes into Chattanooga, humongous storm, and we can see it. We can see the lightning and everything, and it was really weird. Not a drop of rain fell at Ingle Stadium while we was there, and I thought, okay, so that'll wake you up a little bit. That'll make you go, oh, there's something to this. Something's, I mean, there wasn't a roof, and we was out in the middle of the field, so that was kind of like a wake-up moment for Chris. Yeah. And so I stood up a little bit and walked a straight path for a little while, and then kind of did the backsliding thing and how bad the backsliding thing is. And then, of course, that's when Christy came in.
Okay, yeah.
I was... to be honest, I was in a rough place before Christy came in. And I've told you and I've told others, I wasn't a nice guy. I really wasn't.
Yeah.
And Christy came in to my life, and I remember the first time I went to church with her, I thought, okay, well, here we go. We're going to go down another fire and brimstone, and I'm going to hell and everything else. And it was an Episcopal church. Mm-hmm. Totally different.
Now, this wasn't where she grew. This wasn't in where
this was in actually Middle Valley.
Okay.
So right there near Chester Frost.
Okay.
Can't remember the place now.
Yeah, that's all right.
But the first service I went to with Christy, I thought, wow, this ain't too bad. Nobody yelled at me. I didn't get chastised. I wasn't...
they dressed weird and did some weird stuff.
Absolutely. Well, they did. And, my broken memory of things, after I remember telling Christy, I said, man, they got the most effective way of collecting money. And she said, what do you mean? I said, that dude with the sword... She said, there was no sword. I said, I thought they had a sword that they walked around and collected money. And she said, no, there was no sword. I said, okay, I thought it was a sword. And she said, they come down the aisle with a cross. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I was used to every head bowed, every eye closed, nobody looking around. That's the Baptist way. Don't look at other people.
Yeah.
And so, I thought I saw a sword, and I thought, man, that is effective. You can get some money out of people that way.
I might need to try that.
But another thing about that very first time I ever went to the Episcopal Church, they were having a retreat afterwards. And so they said, you want to come to the retreat? I said, sure. Me and Christy, we went to the retreat. We sat down, we was eating. The pastor, the priest, he came by and he sat down with me, and I'll never forget this. He sits down and he's got a tall boy of Budweiser, and he sets it on the table, and I grabbed it and stuck it under the table.
You were trying to hide it?
And he started laughing.
Pastor went wild. We got to protect him.
And he said, Baptist, huh? Yes, sir. He said, that's okay. And I thought, wow. So there's I don't know. Is it that you can actually live your life and be who you are and still be a Christian? Mm-hmm. That's something I wasn't used to because, I mean, you didn't drink. You drank, but you didn't show that you drank.
Yeah.
You cleaned everything up by 11 o'clock on Saturday night. And by 12 o'clock on Wednesday, you had to have everything cleaned up. And
yeah.
So I thought, wow, this is kind of different. Mm-hmm. And so I started myself then exploring the Episcopal faith, and I thought, wow, there's people that think different and they kind of think on how I think. I like this. I can get back into this. And that really kicked me in and got me going down the path of being in church, being regularly in church, enjoying going to church. More important, it got me into praying more. And
so is that sort of where like a more internal relationship began?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It just seeing that, hey, you can be yourself, you can be alive, you can be a person. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to be beat down.
Striving to be perfect when
Absolutely.
we know we can't. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I know it's a theme that comes up a ton in these conversations, but yeah, that barrier that a lot of people have of like, which makes total sense. Like, why would you ever think you could approach God if your only understanding of God is of judgment, right? Then why would you even want to approach
Absolutely.
an entity like that, you know? So that's interesting. Yeah. So what did that look like? You start just praying more in general, just
Praying
like out of church, like just in your life, just talking to God, just
daily.
Was that just natural and it was just you doing Chris's own thing in prayer, or did you use like methods for that?
Just Chris's own thing.
Yeah.
And listening to others and being in different classes, Sunday school classes, talking with different pastors, preachers, and priests. It was Father David Hackett. Love that man.
Yeah.
And so
dude.
for a long time.
He recently passed. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry to do that to you on the podcast.
Oh, man. No.
Yeah.
But, well, Father Hackett, when we first moved up here, I worked third shift, and I couldn't go to regular church. By the time I got off from church, sometimes I'd show up, like in the middle of a church. And he just told me one day, he said, come by and see me during the week. He said, I'll catch you up. And I said, all right, fine. So we got to, became a habit, basically on Mondays, I'd go by and get 2 sausage biscuits and go over to St. James, meet with Father Hackett, sit down, chit-chat, talk. He would go over the sermon with me. And he's the one that really told me, he said, whenever you pray, Chris, he said, pray like you're just sitting down talking to God. He said, he'll hear you.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, so that's good. I don't have to only be at the front of the altar of the church praying.
Yeah.
And we also discussed that, every head bowed, every eye closed. And he said, how was that? And I said, it led to the fear, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't pray unless I go up there to the front where nobody can see me. Which was something else that was pretty interesting. Jumping back real quick, in the Baptist faith, you was not allowed to look around. You couldn't see when the hand was raised who was sinning.
Wow. See, I don't know these things.
Oh
yeah.
That's
interesting.
Raise your hand if you need prayer or you're in sin, but everybody's head's bowed, every eye's closed. But yet,
It's sort of a form of confession.
Sort of.
Yeah.
But whenever it came time for you to accept God into your life, you had to go up front to do that. And you had to go up and explain why you wanted to do that.
Yeah. Now, is that just the first time, or is that anytime you backslid and it's like you're upping?
I don't know. I've never seen a what you would call a re-upping in the Baptist church.
Well, that's what I mean, though. Is like, so like when someone comes forward, is it because it's the first time they've, given their life? Is that, or Do you do that throughout your life?
You can do that throughout your life.
So like basically if you felt you were doing wrong,
Right, you could go up.
You go up there and it's like re-accepting.
And receive a basically prayer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you could do that.
So it really is sort of like confession in a way, because you're confessing something and then you're being renewed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, sorry. Jump back and forth real quick. We'll probably do that a lot. But yeah, Father Hackett, we built a very strong relationship through that, and he taught me how to basically pray, and just one of the most important things that he ever taught me. He said, sometimes just say thank you.
Yeah,
that's it. He said that's a prayer in itself. He said just sit down and say thank you, Lord. Well, that's okay. Yeah, you're right.
Yep. People would get sick of me, but if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, it is enough. Meister Eckhart. I love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, Hackett was instrumental in me and with the Episcopal faith.
I had forgotten that, and this is just sort of an aside, but it's funny. People come to me. I've collected stories about how David Hackett affected various people's lives.
Oh, wow.
Like they just come. I mean, it's just fascinating because they're folks that maybe were like you in a different church, and well, you were here, but even people who maybe had him as a priest, like in Chattanooga or whatever, they end up where I am. I guess I'm just saying I've witnessed this one priest have an impact on a handful of people's lives, and it's been really cool. And I have this little regret because I kept saving those stories for when I would see him next, because I wanted to share those stories with him. And I never got the chance to.
Oh.
Yeah. I've shared him with his son. His son's my good buddy, but yeah.
I need to meet his son sometime.
Yeah.
That would be good, because his dad, he was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So you start developing sort of a internal spiritual life, praying to God, not feeling like there's all these barriers, not feeling so much of the guilt. That conversation is interesting to me, because it's like, as we already named, you see the downside and the negative part of the feeling guilty, right? As we've already named, like it makes you feel distant from this thing we call God.
Right.
At the same time, some of us could use a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Like there's this weird middle ground place, because on the flip side, if I want to be hypercritical of the context I'm in the Episcopal Church, oftentimes there's no talk of or recognition of wrong or sin or anything, And it's like, you could, I guess sometimes if I'm being very negative, it could be misconstrued in a way of like not taking your faith seriously.
Okay.
And so it's just funny because I don't know. I guess I'm just naming it. It's like we need that balance a little bit, but totally get your context. I mean, your story is common with a lot of people, especially in the South, coming out of a place that is so like guilt focused. So of course, the Episcopal approach is going to be a breath of fresh air,
Definitely.
and that's good, and it's needed, and it's, as your naming was transformative in your life. Yeah, I guess I'm just naming. There's always a flip side.
I think it would be. I don't know. I would love to sit on the back pew and see a fire and brimstone preacher come into Ascension and with his handkerchief and his sweat and beating on the...
Walking on the back of the pews.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been to a couple of those. There used to be things like that where churches would do like interchanges.
Oh, really?
Exchange preachers for a Sunday, and just to sort of be in bigger community, but...
I've been away from what I call backwood Baptist and independent Baptist for so long. I don't know if they still preach in that style.
Yeah. Or if they've evolved.
Because I mean, it was scary.
Yeah.
There's a possibility a lot of that has changed, and that's I don't know. I needed it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It stuck with me. It's 55 years. It stuck with me, but I'm also glad for the Episcopal side where I can go, all right, let's just relax. What's this going to be on today? Hang on. Let me look. I can look. I run Cigars, Spirits, and Scripture, and I post every single Sunday, and I got a calendar I go to, and I know exactly what to post. Mm-hmm. That's refreshing. That's good.
Tell people what that is, that group.
We meet once a month. It's a group of Christian men that come together. We smoke a few cigars. We meet at different locations. Do we come there and go through the scripture? No. But we are Christian men that are gathering and showing that Christian men can gather together and still have a good time. We have a great time.
Yeah.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And like I said, each Sunday I do a posting. The postings, I was going to discontinue the postings. And a buddy of mine, you know him, Adam. So I went one Sunday where I did not do the postings. And Adam sent me a text and said, dude, what happened in church? And I said, oh, it's not what happened in church. You can follow along. And he said, yeah, okay, but make sure you put it back on there next week.
Oh, yeah, he missed it.
So he was following it.
Yeah.
And
unbeknownst to you.
I didn't know it. I had no idea. He's a musician. He's on the road all the time.
Yeah.
And, here he was following this.
Yeah,
I had no idea. So, hey, I did. I reached out and, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
One
great.
little small part was
That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Cigar, Spirits, and Scripture was doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's great. So what else would you say about that journey, of that internal sort of spiritual awareness? Anything else you would name there? I mean, you sort of got us into just your exposure to what was new, and you changed a little bit there. Has that journey continued, or like where did you go from there?
Extreme continue. Shortly after Father Hackett, he was just an intern at St. James, so he left. And
an interim, yeah.
Interim, yeah. So actually, I went and spoke with him, and he turned us on to Ascension. Christy had been, and so we went to Ascension, started at Ascension. Fortunate or unfortunate, we came under the spell of this guy, you might know him, Howard. I will never forget the first Sunday that we went, and I was leaving, and Howard said, okay, I'll see you next week. And I said, yeah, okay. That's what they do. They stand at the back of the church, and they say, I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, 3 days later, Christy says, you got a phone call. And I said, who is it? And Father Howard. I said, who? And they answered the phone, and he said, hey, just checking up on you, and going to be seeing you on Sunday, right? And I said, of course, like everybody does, you can't say no to Howard. Yeah, you'll see me on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so, boom, I showed up again, and we showed up again. And then God kind of started moving in my life. I was at work one day, cleaning a pool. I was actually standing in probably like 2 feet of muck, and I get this phone call, and it's from a guy that I've known him all right, and he says, hey, I got a trip going to Bolivia, and I need somebody. I need you to go with me. And I said, sure. Yeah, why not? And so, it was you.
Yeah.
So, we get to talking a little bit more, and found out that I needed a passport, which I didn't have. And
it was coming up quick.
It was about a little over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so, as I told you, and I went home and I talked with Christy, and Christy said, I think you ought to go. This sounds like a great opportunity. And I said, I don't know. Well, yeah, we'll see. Next day, I went to go get a passport because I thought you just go down to the post office and passports are laying right there on the right and stamps are on the left. And so found out real quick, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I don't know if I've told you this. The day I went to get my passport, I went to the big post office, and when I stepped in, I asked the one guy behind the counter, hey, where do you get your passport? And he said, oh, it's right over here at this door. So I looked, and there's a door. And there was a lot of people, I thought, waiting on a copying machine. There's a copying machine right beside it. And I thought, wow, that is a lot of people wanting to make copies. That's ridiculous. And I walked up to the door and opened it, and the guy to my right said, what do you think you're doing? Mm-hmm. I said, I'm going to go ahead and get my passport. And he said, yes, so's the rest of these people. This line stretched. And I was on lunch break, and I thought, oh, man,
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't wait here. So went back to work. I thought, I'm just going to call Brett and tell him, sorry, dude, I tried to get my passport and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it was weighing on me. So I started calling around and finally called the Halls Library, and they said, why don't you go to the Halls post office? I think they do passports there. So I did. I called them, and the woman said, get here as fast as you can, and we'll do what we can. I said, perfect. Went to the Halls post office, walked in, walked over to the passport office. The door was locked. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. And the postmaster guy said, yeah, she had a family emergency. She had to leave.
Oh, my gosh.
And I said, oh, dang. And he said, what's going on? I said, I was trying to get a passport.
Yeah.
He said, I might be able to help you. When do you need it? And I said, 2 weeks. And he laughed and said, yeah, that's not going to happen. He said, but if we
expedite it.
Mm-hmm. He said, it might.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll never forget, I came out from there and I called you. And I know you're 2 weeks out from going to Bolivia. You got 1,000 things that are going on. And you was like, yeah, man, okay, all right. Yeah, just let me know when you get it. And I was like, okay. And the craziness of that is that passport came within a week.
Yeah, that's nuts.
And that's when I told Christy, I said, this is meant to be. This is a God thing.
Yeah.
I have to go on this trip. That started transforming my life a little bit more. And when I say that, it's more to give a little bit more of yourself, Chris. You got talents, use them. Mm-hmm. And
are you saying that experience in Bolivia did that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. That was a great experience. It was a fun trip. God.
Well, that's why I wanted you to go so bad. That's why I chose you to ask to go, because, most people listening to this don't know this, but yeah, when we take these mission trips to Bolivia, we're doing these, all kinds of hodgepodgey construction-ish projects, and you don't have the tools that you need.
No, you don't.
One, I'm taking a bunch of people that most of the people on the trip probably they don't even know how to use a shovel, and then on top of it, even if they have some experience with things like that, you're given a task and you don't even have the tools that you normally would have here to accomplish that task.
Absolutely.
And so it takes someone who really knows. And so I saw you as like, all right, Chris knows how to do things, how to make stuff of something, how to, and so that's, yeah. So that it's just interesting that those two perspectives coincide, because I saw you as like a real gift and, I guess, tool, pun intended, for that trip.
Right.
And then you're saying that being there and experiencing that and us leaning on your skills and talents opened you to more of an awareness of like you're needing to use those for good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That was, I tell people all the time about that trip. I don't know if you remember. We were, there was a gate, and it had been locked for, I don't know how long. And our mission was to take the lock off, install a new lock. No problem.
Right.
Let's just go down to the hardware store. We'll get a lock, come back over here, take this lock off. And it was the biggest issue. Just getting nuts, bolts, and screws.
Oh, yeah.
I remember you sent somebody out. They was on a motorcycle. And I said, hey, we need this and this. And you said, all right, no problem. And the guy left, and he's gone forever. And he comes back, and in his pockets, he's got like 15 loose nuts.
Because he didn't know which.
And, I mean, they're used.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
And I said, what is this? And he was like, yeah, this is what you got to work with, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, we made it happen.
Yeah.
I had a group of kids with me. Bennett Monroe was one of them. Gosh, man, he was great. That was, I mean, and the project took, God, like 4 hours.
Yep.
You didn't have, and I was upset with you because I could have brought one tool bag. And we could have had that done in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, man, why didn't he let me bring that? But it was also the experience of those kids. They got to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing. Something else, I don't know if you even...
I do that on purpose, you know.
Well, I figure.
Because what would you learn? How would you be stretched and grown if you weren't challenged, you know?
That gate, there was one small gate and there was a big gate. At the small gate, on the other side, was a little dog. Mm-hmm. For 4 hours, this little dog barked at us. Now, he could have walked 10 feet, and there was a big gate that was open.
Yeah.
But we was on one side working. He was on the other side. 4 hours, this little dog's barking and yapping and barking and yapping, and we finally get the lock off, and we open the door, and the little dog's eyes was big, and he just looked at us. And then he turned around and just walked off down the street. It was amazing. I loved it. It was that there was so many, I call them God moments in that trip, and that's been such a powerful influence in my life. Just having the knowledge to share the knowledge to do that work was, that was. Mm-hmm. A continued blessing for me, and it was a reassurance. I've made the right choice of being in the Episcopal Church. It reassured me. It let me know. It's like, hey, yeah, you're doing good.
Yeah. Well, and just going on a trip like that was a huge leap of faith for you. I mean, like, because you had never gone anywhere like that, right?
No.
Or thought about it, really. Like,
never.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was completely out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
More than you could ever imagine. That was thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
That was my continued growth and my walk with Christ, basically. And gosh.
Yeah. So where do you go from there? What else would you name in your spiritual journey? Has been significant to you.
From there, I was doing some work, sales work, and I did some maintenance and I did some sales work, and I wasn't particularly happy with my sales work, and I actually went down and talked with Father Howard, and he said, it doesn't sound like this is what you're driven to do, Chris. Mm-hmm. You need to kind of change. And so I did. I went back to a more driven maintenance work, helping work. Started working in an assisted living maintenance. That was great, and it was also horrible at the same time. Mm-hmm. I have a tendency to get close to people, mm-hmm. and when you get close to people,
who are close to death, yeah.
And so really worked at that for a little while and thought, I can't continue to do this. I want to do something else. And I did. I left that, went to work for the post office, and that wasn't that good. And I felt the need to be helping people, still helping people.
Yeah.
And that's what really brought me to where I work now, 101 Mobility. We do stair lifts, chair lifts, elevators, patient lifts, power wheelchairs, but it's still helping people.
Yeah.
And I do. I feel like God has pulled me to that. More so when I did installs. I do sales now, and I miss the aspect of the install. I miss seeing people get on their chair for the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
And go from downstairs to the second floor.
Uh-huh.
It's a really joy to watch someone do that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think, maybe you realize this, but I have lots of conversations with people pretty frequently, especially young folks that are struggling to find what you just described. A lot of people never find what you just described. So it's such a gift. We sort of say calling is where your gifts and talents, your God-given gifts and talents, line up with the opportunities around you, right? Where you can use those skills and those gifts to help others. But a lot of people in their profession don't find that, and so I think that's a bigger deal than folks might think.
I agree. Mm-hmm. It's rewarding on a different level. It really is. And like I said, I miss that now. I used to laugh. I would be in someone else's home, mm-hmm. and they haven't been on the second floor in a couple of months. And they ride their stair lift upstairs, and they turn around and look at me and say, "Can I go look around up here for a second?" And I say, "Yeah, it's your house. I'm going to clean up some tools. You go look around, and then we'll get together and we'll talk about."
Just because they hadn't been up there.
They haven't been up there in a long time. We're down in the basement for a long time.
Yeah.
And they start telling me, "Oh my gosh, look! Oh."
Yeah.
And that was a real joy. But I feel like I got to that believing in my prayer, listening to others. I listened to Father Hackett, and I listened to Father Howard. I listened to you. Mm-hmm. And all that has been, in my opinion, spiritually driven. Mm-hmm. Listen to Christy.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I love about doing this podcast, and you hear me talk to people about like what are the ways that God speaks to you, but one of my favorite things is sort of what you've walked us through is where we get to see the God thread run through your life, right? Sort of this, in retrospect, like you probably didn't see or wouldn't have characterized what you're talking about in the moment.
No.
Right? You wouldn't, but when you look back, it's undeniable.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I love that. Speaking of that, so you've named a couple things. I mean, what language do you feel God uses to speak to you? I picked up a couple throughout your story. I mean, you had a little story about creation, about nature, like with the storm. You had through the voices of other people, right? Through others. There was a couple there. Is that do you feel you have a main way that you feel God speaks to you, or?
I don't think there's a main way. I think He speaks to me in different ways. I also think that sometimes God says to Chris, He maybe doesn't say this to anybody else, but He says, "Your way of thinking right now is wrong, and I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you how you're going to change." That has happened quite a few times. Trip to Bolivia.
Yeah. That's interesting. So there's like a stretching and growing component, like taking you to the place you didn't want to go.
Most definitely. Yeah. It's takes me to sometimes a pain side, and then a reward.
Yeah.
Has never failed to produce a reward. Mm-hmm. It's really strange. Your listeners may not know, we do have a transgender child. I was brought up in backwoods Baptist, independent Baptist, Deep South.
Right.
And sometimes I think God says, need your help on this, Chris. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you the gift of a transgender child. Mm-hmm. And don't fail me. Mm. And so that's my mission.
Yeah, yeah.
Protect Lily.
Yeah.
Educate others. Always let people know that the biggest thing, and I can't remember where I heard this, and it may have been on a cartoon at one time, but God doesn't make mistakes, no matter what. Mm-hmm. He doesn't make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you probably know the roar. You can't put God in a box. Mm-hmm. We're not the controllers of God. Mm-hmm. So He's not made any mistakes. He uses us for different things as tools. Mm-hmm. God uses us as tools all the time, I believe.
Yeah, well, and there's that other component or angle to what we're talking about. Like, we loosely sort of say the great reversal, but, story after story after story in Old Testament and New Testament of the one that is chosen, or the one that ends up being, take King David, right? Take the woman at the well. And there's countless stories, but it's the one that culture and society would have rejected is the one that God takes and elevates.
True.
And so there's a component of that there too.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man. I'm glad you shared that, just because it especially that part of like given your context and background, where you came from, to stand bravely and fearlessly into that moment as a father of a transgender child, right? And into that context, and to show like I can love and accept. And that's a powerful image. That's cool.
Definitely. Lily's my baby.
Yeah, right, sure. And I get that. And I know you well enough to know there wouldn't be any other way. But I just mean, especially given your background and where you come from and stuff, like that's a power. That's, you're not being the father of a transgender child in Los Angeles.
Right.
It's a different thing,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And forgive me, I'm not trying to say to anybody in Los Angeles that that's not a challenge, but it's a different context for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I do also feel that, I don't know, God's gifted us, not just chosen, He's gifted us, Christy and I, this chance. Yeah. And I'm usually, I think you know this, I'm not a quiet person. And so when I believe in something, I will be very vocal about it. Mm-hmm. And I can tend to be not one that's looked over. I'll make sure you notice me, mm-hmm. and make sure people will see me. And I think that's why God said, I'm going to choose you. Mm-hmm. And that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Really is.
That's beautiful, man. What I'm watching time. What else would you name about life? that brings us kind of up to now.
Another moment I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, you can, if you want to, you can go into what are the most powerful spiritual moments.
Spiritual moments.
We can get into ghost stories too, and that kind of stuff.
I can definitely get into that with you. Yeah. But one moment that Christy and I shared with a very good friend of ours, Ned. We did a prayer session with Ned a few years ago, and I don't know, Christy differs on exactly what happened than I do, but during this prayer session with my great friend, and that's what he is my great friend Ned.
And you were praying for Ned because?
For healing.
Right, because he has ALS.
ALS, yes. And so during this prayer session, there was a storm that came up, and there
the
was
second time you named that.
I know it. It's nature and storm and me and God. We run together. But there was wind. There was lightning. I mean, I thought I heard hail beating against the window. And it was, I was thinking, my goodness, I'm glad we're inside. This is bad. I didn't lose focus on what I was doing, but man, I thought, man, this storm just blew up out of nowhere. And afterwards, on the ride home, Christy and I was talking, and I said, that's one of the worst storms I've ever seen. And she said, what are you talking about?
What?
And I said, the storm that came in while we was praying. She said, I didn't hear it. I said, yeah, you did. There was lightning. I heard lightning, and I heard rain, and I heard this storm. And to me, that was just it was a God moment.
Yeah, that's real interesting. Huh.
That stands out so much, and it was very
Because it was
powerful.
so real to you.
It was.
Yeah.
Very real. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Definitely.
Cool. What else? What other, like, do you have one moment you would say is the most, like, profound experience for you?
No.
Because it sounds more like, again, you're the most significant parts of your spiritual journey have been in looking back and seeing God's hand at play there.
Right.
You know, so some people don't have that sort of smack over the head in-breaking of the spirit moment, but
I would say I don't have one moment. I think I have many.
Yeah.
And I compare it to the spines of an umbrella. Mm-hmm. It holds everything up. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to see and experience 3 to 5 of them. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be more.
Yeah.
Because there's more spines holding up this umbrella and protecting me.
I like that image a lot. Yeah. I've always talked about those in terms of like touchstones. You collect these touchstones, and so when you have times of doubt or struggle or whatever, those are those things that, to your point, to your analogy, hold you up.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. That's good.
But 100%, I believe my journey is not over.
Yeah.
I got a lot more to do.
For sure.
And I'm glad of that.
Yeah. Well, let me say too to you, just to embarrass you for a sec. What I see in you in terms of, I mean, you've named some of these, but I think you have a great ministry. Well, in as a priest, we call it like the ministry of presence, right? Young priests struggle a lot with, like, okay, you're confronted with all these intense moments of life, marriage, divorce, sickness, death, birth, all these significant moments. And there's a real big, for lack of a better term, like imposter syndrome that goes on when you're a young priest. And so we'll talk a lot about how you'll learn over time that, because the young priest wants to know, like, well, what do I say? Like, what prayer do I use? What do I do?
Right.
And we sort of say, it's just your being there. That's truly, and that's not being flippant or downplaying. It truly is the power of those moments is just your presence and being with people. And I think that's something beautiful about you that you do naturally. And I don't know that you even really think much about it or consider it as something special or important, but I've seen you throughout our friendship do that so naturally with Ned, with Ed Green.
Wow. Goodness, we didn't even get to Ed yet.
Well, just for people, I mean, and a beautiful old man that went to Bolivia with us, with Chris, and then, guy's old. He doesn't have a lot of people around him or community, and so Chris would just natural what Chris does, like organize Scotch nights for this guy, just to go out and be with other people and have fun and chat and tell his stories, and that's all. Again, I know you well enough to know that that's just second nature to you. You don't think about it, but those are really powerful, beautiful things. So
Thank you.
It's something I greatly appreciate about you.
Wow. Yeah. Hadn't even touched the wonderful, the great, the powerful, the man, the myth, Ed Green.
Yeah, I don't think we could convey much of that over a podcast.
Yeah.
Ed Green's one of those, like, you had to be there.
Definitely.
But I do, just because, and this is just all pure because I know you so well, but before we cut out, because you have a whole world of experiences that I would call spiritual. I mean, that's part of what this show is exploring what does that word mean. So otherworldly kind of stuff, ghost stuff. Was it strange aunts or neighbors that were sort of clairvoyant, or like you've told me a lot of those. So pick one or two. Like, what are those kind of stories from your life that are big to you?
So growing up, we had a cousin she read cards.
Okay.
And her name was Betty.
Gypsy woman.
Yeah. So my cousin and I would go up and we'd get our cards read.
Yeah.
And there was one particular time.
You said she was a neighbor or she was a cousin?
She was a cousin.
Okay. But you couldn't tell your mama you were going to do that.
No. No. Did not. No, don't let Mom know that.
Yeah.
But there was one time, and I believe this is what you're talking about. Danny and I had gone, we went and seen Betty. Betty Dent was her name. And she was in Daisy, Tennessee. And we left from there.
It's the other side of Saudi, for those who don't know that. Yeah.
That's the better side. But Danny, my cousin, he said, I don't think she was telling us everything. Let's go, and we used to call this other woman who read cards Downtown Betty. Mm-hmm. Her name was Betty also. Mm-hmm. He said, let's go see Downtown Betty. And I said... Oh.
And you guys just were wanting to get those read for what?
Just, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Just stupid.
Okay, it wasn't something
I was like 16 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I think Danny was in his early 20s. Just craziness, you know? Yeah. So we did. We went and seen Downtown Betty. Mm-hmm. And she read cards differently than Betty Dent. And she would tell you deeper, darkest stuff. Mm-hmm. At the time, Danny was on dialysis. He did dialysis, I think at that time, he was 2 times a week. Mm-hmm. So his kidneys and everything was bad. So Downtown Betty would tell Danny stuff of, you're not going to make it long.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Danny felt she was being more truthful. But so we did. We saw Downtown Betty, and a month or 2 later, we go up and we see Good Betty.
Yeah.
Glenda Betty. Yeah. And when we walked in and sat down, Betty came in and she sat down and she looked at me and she looked at Danny and she said, do not ever go back down to see her again. And we both looked at each other and she said, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Wow. Do not go to Downtown Betty again. And then come into my house.
Wow.
And she did a sage thing. And so we were both like,
just blown away that she knew that.
And I mean, there was no way that she would know.
Right. They're not cell phones.
No, no cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, and it was a month after we had gone down there. We spoke nothing of this to anyone.
Yeah.
But whenever we came in there and sat down, and usually you'd come in, you'd sit down in her living room, and she would go back to her kitchen table and set everything up and then come in and get you and bring you in there and you'd sit and talk one at a time. She sat down in the living room and was like, do not ever go back down there and then come into my house. And that was like, oh, that was scary.
Weird
that was
stuff.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah, I'm good. I don't need to mess with any of that.
No. And we never did go back down to see. I never did.
Yeah.
I never went back to see Downtown Betty again because that was hooky. that put the hairs up on the back of your neck.
Yeah.
But I know you want to. I don't know if you want to even dig into.
I don't know.
Other mythical stuff.
I don't know. I'm just here for the story, man. I mean,
I will
whatever you
say up front, I am a believer in Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and others. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going to
open,
to a session. So yeah, I do believe in that.
Yeah. You had any big experiences like that, or just in life in general, just other things like that have impacted you, like the Betty story?
I know whenever I was real young, my Aunt Judy had a house, and so there was this spirit that was in there, and my Aunt Judy always.
Now, why do you say that?
You would catch glimpses of it. You would see it, and I mean, I'm 5 to 7 years old. I remember seeing it come down the hall.
What it looked like?
Just to be a dark figure.
Yeah.
For some weird reason, it always went into the bathroom and turned the faucet on.
Huh.
And it wouldn't flush a toilet.
Trying to pee.
Don't know.
Stage fright.
Turn the faucet on, and the whole family would be sitting in the living room watching TV, and you would see different family members look down the hallway, and within a minute, the water would turn on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, my Aunt Judy would get up and go down and turn the water off. But she used to always tell me, don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
It's not here to hurt you. She was also the daughter of a preacher, and she would always tell us, God's going to protect you no matter what.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. But also, don't let its actions hurt you.
Yeah.
You hurt yourself because of that.
Yeah.
It's just going into the bathroom. And that left an impression with me.
Yeah, of course. Is that like your most clear experience of something like that?
One of them, yeah. That I talk about.
Oh, man.
I mean, I saw stuff when I worked at the assisted living facility. You would see different stuff that would happen.
Yeah.
It was strange and odd and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think it was always real interesting, the ladies that did the cleaning, Karen and Dina. Anytime somebody passed, they would go into the room and open the window.
Oh.
And I always thought, that is strange, odd, but then respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just their way of showing respect. Really, I don't know. It stuck with me.
You asked them why?
Yeah, to
let the soul out.
Let the soul out.
Because they can't get out of the
Can't get out of a window. Can't go out the door.
Yeah.
Got to go out the window. Odd.
That's good.
Definitely odd.
Yeah.
I also had a moment not too long ago, and I can't remember the scripture. You'll know the scripture. I don't. Jesus is talking, and I didn't even realize it. I was doing the postings for Cigars, Spirits, and Scripture, and after I posted it, I'm reading through it, and I said, oh my goodness, Jesus believed in ghosts. And he talked about ghosts. And it's when he was telling his disciples, I'm not a ghost.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought...
when he reappears. Yeah.
When he reappears. And I said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's right there in the Bible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
He believed and spoke of...
Or a spirit, yeah. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of... Yeah, casting out demons, whatever. We don't like to. We like to call that like mental illness now or something. But
right.
But I don't know.
That was a aha moment for me. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is. I know we don't need to dive down that too deep.
No, you're good. But yeah, we've gone longer than you think at this point, I bet. But what else? Anything else you want to name? Chris's spiritual life, or you feel good?
I feel good. It's still ongoing. It's a fun journey. And the older I get, the more I'm understanding and liking and knowing that you can live your life and still be a Christian. That's a good thing. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good people that's in the Christianity. It's
despite the mainstream portrayal of it these days. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I know. That's one of my big frustrations for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, good, brother. Well, I'm thankful you're here and that you're out there, and I love you, and you're one of my favorite people, and I appreciate you doing this with me.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And love you. Love the family. Thankful for you. Thankful for letting me be a part of your journey too.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I feel feelings mutual. So maybe we'll do this again sometime. I know there's rumors of Chris's own podcast, so we'll see. We'll see when that happens. We'll advertise it on here.
Definitely.
So, yeah. All right, brother. Thanks for talking with me.
Thank you.
We'll catch up with you.